Now, we've been talking about energy all week with the news that the taxpayer will be paying coal companies compensation to cover the cost of the Albanese government, making those same taxpayers' energy bills marginally less expensive. Did you follow that? I'd say you can't make it up, but it's reality. And here to help us sort through it is former Resources Minister in Queensland, MP Keith Pitt. Now, Keith, I never imagined that you and ACT independent David Pocock would be on the same page here, but it turns out he's also against the compensation package, and he says that he and the Teals were misled by the government. Tell me, what do you make of all of these compensation claims, which they say could go well north of $500 million?
Well, just to be clear, mate, we're not exactly on the same page. On the page of good policy that's the interest of Australia. And, I mean, there were all sorts of allegations levelled against the coalition government about coal subsidies, which are completely untrue. But here you have a Labor government where they are. This is an actual coal subsidy. I mean, who would have thought it? You can't buy coal on the market under the market price, so they've got to prop it up. I mean, Labor's cure for the energy problems is now going to cost taxpayers far more than the disease. I mean, imagine if you put those billions of dollars into actually building reliable energy generators, electricity generators that work. That might make a difference.
Well, sure, it might make a difference, but that's, you and I both know that's not the main game here. And I love this today because up at the Woodford Festival, Anthony Albanese claimed that everything about people are saying about the compensation was all wrong. Have a listen to this.
Commercial discussions taking place, nothing like the figures that have been out there in the paper, but commercial discussions about a compensation for only where their production costs are more than the costs in which they'll be given.
So while he's trying to run down this whole thing about compensation, Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk has confirmed the payout figures. Is the PM just straight up lying here?
Oh, look, it's got it completely wrong and clearly doesn't understand what it is that their policy is doing. I mean, if you are not the Queensland Labor government where you own the mine and you get coal incredibly cheap, if you don't have a long-term contract, if you don't have those things locked in as an electricity generator that uses coal, guess what? You've got to buy it at market price, and market price is expensive. And if you don't pay the market price, you don't have any coal and hence you don't have any electricity. So I think this is one of the major problems with the policy put forward by federal Labor. It clearly wasn't thought through. They jammed it through the parliament. Now, if Mr Pocock and the Greens are saying they've been misled, well, they could have asked any of us. We would have told them what would have happened.
Yeah, well, that's right. But, I mean, on the subject of money, the PM also had this to say about nuclear energy.
It simply doesn't stack up economically, and that is why it won't happen. It's a distraction from what we actually need to do, which is the cleanest form of new energy, also happens to be the cheapest, and it's renewable. Hundreds of billions of dollars of investment will be required as part of the transition.
So maybe you can help me out here, because you've been in politics a while. On the one hand, he's saying that this is the cheapest thing in the world to do, and on the other hand, it's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars to make this transition happen. Are we starting to see the same problems with the PM and numbers we did during the campaign? Or is opposition to things like nuclear now just a matter of faith and not reason?
Well, cheapest and cleanest in terms of Labor proposals is just not true. It's not factual. They're full of heavy metals. You've got to build 28,000 kilometres of transmission. You've got to have enormous swathes of land covered in solar panels that get replaced every 20 years, assuming they don't hit by a hailstorm. And yet the UAE, South Korea, the UK, France and any other number of countries are expanding their nuclear program because it works and it is clean. It is zero emissions. It lasts for up to 100 years. And what's left in terms of the residue and waste is so much smaller in volume. What on earth are you going to do with millions of solar panels? And since when do batteries become environmentally friendly? It is crazy.
Well, yeah, and I mean, if you've been watching the news around the world, I mean, where I'm from, New York, there's just, mountains of snow everywhere, power outages everywhere. And in other parts of America, they just simply aren't able to keep the lights on, not because of the weather, but because they don't have the supply. The same thing's happening in the UK. In Germany, tell me, I mean, shouldn't we be looking close and hard at what the global experience is right now and say, hey, we don't want this, let's get more supply online?
Well, if you want a comparison, Germany has put €200 billion on the table for subsidies for gas and electricity because their people just can't pay the bills. And you've pointed out what's happening in the US. There's a whole stack of people who have died from exposure. Now, we don't want to see that in Australia. We are a resource-rich country. Why shouldn't we be using our coal, our assets, our uranium for the benefit of the Australian people? There's technology out there which Labor simply abandons, whether that's carbon capture and storage, nuclear or otherwise. But we have to make the case in terms of nuclear electricity production in this country, and that's what we intend to do.
And I mean, you mentioned Australian coal a moment ago, and it seems to me that there's a trade deal with China in the works. Is this a case of that we are going to be happy to sell our coal for China to use, but not for us to use? I mean, how does that make any sense?
Oh, that would be no surprise to me whatsoever. I mean, you've got all the comrades in the one room, and I think there'll be a deal done, and they've been putting that forward in the press today. But what's the cost? Well, you've got to walk away from the WTO actions. I mean, China clearly didn't meet the requirements of the rules-based system in terms of world trade. They haven't done that. Will they do it into the future? Will they take our coal? I'd say so, because they need it. But you can't use it in Australia because federal Labor says it's terrible.
Absolutely bonkers. But finally, Keith, the National Party has come out courageously, I think, to oppose the voice. And PM Albanese has dismissed this today and criticism that it lacks detail. And he says the majority of Indigenous people support it. But how can he really say this when there are so many eloquent Aboriginal voices against it, including the Nationals' Jacinta Price?
Well, there's a whole stack of them never heard of it. They're too busy trying to pay their bills and afford the cost of living. Look, it's not a hard decision for the National Party. This is something where it's simply a proposition which we don't support. For me, I think we are one people, we are one country, we are all equal. And if you don't support that, well, vote a different way in the referendum, but you'll get your choice coming up. But don't be fooled by Labor. They don't want to give you the detail because it's a secret. They want you to vote for something and then say they'll deal with the details afterwards. That's incredibly dangerous, and they won't fund the yes and the no case. I think the alarm bell should be going off everywhere.
Thank you so much, Keith Pitt, for your time. Really appreciate the insights.